Hi, Sports 2.0 show for June 7th. I'm Allyson Park, and this is Akshay Kumbar. And today we're going to be talking about two major topics, both pertaining to the upcoming NFL season. So first of all, on our roster, we're going to talk about the Julio Jones trade. So yesterday, the Falcons announced that they traded Julio Jones to the Tennessee Titans. In exchange for Jones, the Titans will send a 2022 second-round draft pick and a 2023 fourth-round selection to the Falcons. And in addition to Jones, the Falcons will send the Titans a 2023 sixth-round draft pick to them. So first of all, I want to get your thoughts on this. So what was your initial reaction to this news?
Just, in utter surprise, really. There's few people in the NFL that I think would, leave their team, whether, it's free agency or being traded. And Julio Jones was definitely one of those people. I thought he was going to be, a Falcon for life.
Yeah.
But recent events and stuff, he's on the Titans now. I think both teams actually benefit from this, but I think Julio Jones is going to have a great time in Tennessee as well, and I think those fans should be excited.
Yeah. I think it's really fun that everyone on the Titans seems to be really excited too. I know that a couple of the players have even made TikTok videos telling him to come over to the Titans, so I think that's really fun. But I definitely agree that it's going to be an adjustment for both fans and coaches and coaching staff to be like, oh yeah, Julio Jones is on the Titans now with Ryan Tannehill. So I think it's going to be an interesting season to watch for sure. But it's going to be really exciting. I'm sure all those Titans fans are so happy about the news.
Yeah. So I think, in your opinion, who do you think won this trade more?
That is a really good question. My initial reaction would be Titans, obviously, because they're getting an amazing wide receiver who's been playing in the NFL for 9 years and has never failed to impress. Even last season, when he was out with a hamstring injury, he still made the most of it. And even though statistically it might not have been as good because he didn't play as many games, he really did perform well in the games that he did play in. But I think it's important to remember that the Falcons also gained a lot from cutting him as well, with all the confusing stuff around his salary and the fact that they needed to take pay cuts anyway. It's something to think about, that not always the team who gives up the player is the loser technically in this situation. But to answer your question, I would still say I think the Titans technically won this trade, because I think the Tannehill Jones matchup is going to be really fun to watch. But I think the Falcons definitely made the right move by making the trade, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think defensive coordinators are going to have, a hell of a week planned out for them when they're playing the Titans. They got to deal with, the reigning offensive player of the year in Derrick Henry, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. And they got to deal with, an up-and-coming A.J. Brown, who's a two-time Pro Bowler. And they have to deal with Julio Jones on the outside too. I think it's going to be an insane matchup for, any defense that has to play them. And it's going to be fun to watch for sure. And on the other side, the Falcons as well, trading Julio Jones gets rid of his contract. So they get $15 million in cap space, which gives them money to actually sign their rookie class. Because before this weekend, they only had around $300,000 in cap space, and that wasn't enough to sign any of the rookies. So I think that what they did was, really smart for them in the long run as well. And, they're still contenders. They still have Calvin Ridley, who is an amazing receiver, definitely had a really good season last year, even with Julio Jones out as wide receiver one. And now they're getting, arguably the greatest, tight end prospect of all time in Kyle Pitts. So I think it's going to be, it's really a win-win for both teams. But I do agree with you that I think that the Titans do win this a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think obviously we all know that Jones has been unhappy in Atlanta for a while, especially considering Matt Ryan's performance, which is leaving some to be desired, because they haven't really been a Super Bowl contender since their appearance in 2017 against the Patriots. That was a bad loss for them. But they really haven't been serious Super Bowl contenders ever since then. So I think he was just getting frustrated with the lack of improvement and moving forward with the team. So I think that now that he's in Tennessee, he actually sees a lot of hope and a lot of potential, I think, because I definitely agree with you where the Titans, I think, are going to be they're going to be Super Bowl contenders this year. And I think I think Julio Jones is going to be really excited and really pumped to be on a team that he actually believes can go the extra mile, work hard, and make it to the Super Bowl eventually.
Yeah, and so we got a comment from Ryan here. Does this impact AJ Brown's fantasy production in a good way or bad way for the Titans? What are your thoughts on that?
That is an interesting question. I don't know. I genuinely couldn't tell you. I'm not a huge fantasy person myself. It's not in my wheelhouse. So do you have anything that you want to say?
I would say it. I would, in my opinion, from playing fantasy, I think it kind of decreases his value a little bit. A lot of his receptions and possibly, targets are going to be going to Julio Jones now. And, AJ Brown is coming off an injury, riddled season. So I think that, he might be able to take that step back and kind of, work on his health a little bit. And obviously, his stats aren't going to be, it's not going to be terrible, but I don't think it's going to be, where it was last year. I think it'll take a little dip with this Julio Jones trade.
Yeah, that makes logical sense. I think it's also, for me, when I played fantasy, it's always surprised me that when you watch a football game, someone's performance isn't necessarily what's reflected in fantasy points, if that makes sense. So I've definitely watched games where I'm like, oh, that player did such a great job, and then they didn't get many fantasy points, just because the way they do points are a little confusing. But I would definitely agree with you there. I think that since there are more options now, more solid options, Julio Jones is obviously a great receiver. They're going to be splitting the passes a little bit more. So that might not be great for fantasy numbers, but it's good for the team, and it's probably going to be good for everyone else. Like you said, he can take some time to rest and take a little break. So I think even though it might do a little bit badly for AJ Brown's fantasy, then it'll benefit everyone else, and I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah. And speaking of production for the Titans, does getting Julio Jones would it make Derrick Henry's job a little bit easier or a little bit harder in terms of, just getting, the ball, and being able to produce on offense?
Yeah. That's a good question too. I think it depends on the way they choose to play this season, because I can see it going both ways. You understand? Like it depends, I guess, on how well both of them do in these training camps and what the coaches want to do. But I would say they might try to pass it to Jones a little bit more, but I think it'll probably remain even. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I know that the Titans are a very run-heavy offense, and obviously that works with Derrick Henry as a running back. But I think that to appeal to Julio Jones and how the offense he was in with Atlanta, I think they'll kind of go back a little bit on they'll restrict Derrick Henry's attempts a game, because towards the end of the season he was getting around 25, 30 touches a game, and I think that's an absurd amount. But obviously, he's a tank. He can handle those. But I think that, it'll be nice for that offense to kind of just, spread the ball a little bit more and not so much, rely on that run offense.
Yeah, I guess now with Jones, they, like you said, kind of relying on a running game is kind of just the go-to when teams don't have very good wide receivers or when they don't have faith in their quarterback or anything like that. But now that Jones is there, they have more options, I'm trying to say. And they're obviously going to still keep relying on Derrick Henry, but I don't think it'll be out of necessity. It will be out of strategy. Yeah.
And we've got another comment here. It's a question. Are the Titans AFC South favorites over the Colts?
It's a great question. With this trade, I really want to say yes, but I think it'll be a really good matchup. Like, my gut tells me yes, but I guess we'll see. We'll see. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, I think that this trade, obviously it helps the Tennessee offense, but, their defense last year was, really bad. And part of that was the reason why they lost that playoff game. against the Ravens. And they've made a few additions to that defense. Getting Bud Dupree from the Steelers, but I think they actually took a step back on defense this offseason, and I think that might hurt them. And later on in the season when they're making a division push, and I really like the Colts. I think what they have going on there is great. I think that Carson Wentz addition is really going to help that offense. So in my opinion, I think that it really could go both ways to see who wins that AFC South, either the Colts or the Titans.
Yeah, the Carson Wentz thing was super interesting to me because, in my opinion, he has never been a consistent quarterback. He has not been he has his moments. He has his amazing moments, obviously. But for me, I say he's a very inconsistent player, and I would not rely on him, if that makes sense. I wouldn't rely on him and say, we got Carson Wentz, we're okay. I don't think that he's a great player, honestly. And I guess it depends on coaching style and stuff too, but I don't know if that will really make a difference in the Colts game. It sounds much better in my head, as it always does. But I don't have a lot of faith in Carson Wentz's abilities, enough faith to, say that I think they could win the division. My heart really says the Titans, but we'll see. Carson Wentz is a very inconsistent player. Maybe he'll be really, really good this year. We don't know. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. That's something we can't exactly predict.
Yep. So another question, regarding playoffs. Do you think that this edition will, be enough for the Titans to obviously, win the AFC and make the Super Bowl?
Well, obviously, one player is not going to get them to the Super Bowl. They're all going to have to figure out how to work with him, how to work with each other, how to, like you said, strengthen their defense, try to work with each other on that. But I think it can help. I think that he is a valuable asset that can be utilized to get them to that point, but I don't think that it's going to be just because of him. I think the entire team is going to have to make adjustments, like in the defense you said, but the whole team is going to have to make adjustments and learn how to play with a new player and overall just kind of be more of a solid team, put their fans' faith in them and their abilities. But I don't think if they make it to the Super Bowl, it's just going to be because of Julio Jones.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. But, obviously it helps to have a player of that caliber who has, that playoff experience as well. I think that's really what hurt them, last year as well, was that team really didn't have that much playoff experience. Obviously, the year before they made it to the AFC Championship, and that was good and all. But I mean, like even with this season, it's very hard to replicate playoff success. We've seen that a lot. Obviously, the Chiefs make it look easy, but I mean, it's very hard to replicate that playoff success, for any team really. And so I think that. Obviously, this one, I don't think it'll be enough to make the Super Bowl, but I think that they'll have a good shot at making a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also point out that it's really hard. Being consistent in the playoffs is really hard, especially for I was going to say the Patriots, but they're probably the one exception. But, you see that all the time where teams win the Super Bowl and the next year you don't even know how they're doing because they're just not doing that well. Mm-hmm. So I think that you're right in saying the Titans don't have a lot of playoff experience, but I think they're looking to gain some. And I think they're really excited and I think they're really driven. I think this trade is giving them all, even the fans, like a lot of hope. Like they can see the silver lining at the end of the cloud or whatever. But yeah, it's super hard to be consistent in the NFL playoffs, especially since it's a one and done situation, unlike the NBA finals where it's a 6-7 game series and you have more consistent results over what team actually plays better. So we'll see how they do. I really think they will make it to the playoffs, like you said. Not quite sure if they'd make Super Bowl, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if that happened.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on to our next topic. And speaking about, fans and having a lot of hope, there were 8 quarterbacks selected in the, first 3 rounds of this past 2021 NFL draft. And, the top 5 quarterbacks in the first round all have their, respective storylines and stuff. I want your opinion on the top 2 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence and Zack Wilson. What do you think that, what do you think the pressure they have is on their fan base, from their fan bases, as well as, expectations for Trevor Lawrence? And, he's, the number one recruit out of high school and college. What do you think that, he's going to do in the NFL this year?
I am really excited to see what he does. He's just a fun guy to watch, When you tune into like the Clemson game, you're like, it's just a joy to watch this guy play football. He was made to play football. I think everyone is super excited about it, especially since I personally was surprised. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to have gone to the Jaguars. I guess they need that, I guess. But Trevor Lawrence is the best pro quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And I think that's a huge deal. He's drawn comparisons to other greats like Peyton Manning and even John Elway. But he really can do everything. He can run. He's huge. First of all, he's 6'6", 220 pounds. He's huge. Yeah. He's huge. He's got an arm. He can run. Like he's got the whole package. And I think that the Jaguars are really excited to see what they can do with him because the Jaguars have been struggling. I think the past 5 years they've had losing seasons. And I know in 2020 they just won 2 games. So it's only up from there. But I also think that for a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of players in general, the transition to NFL-paced football is very difficult. It's a much faster game. Even someone who just watches NCAA football and NFL football can spot the differences in like how it's completely different.
Yeah.
And that's proven to be a really hard adjustment for a lot of quarterbacks. You see it a lot where people who are really, really good in college just don't thrive in the NFL the way they did in college because it's just such a different game, such a different level. But that being said, I really think Trevor Lawrence is going to do very well in the NFL. It might take a little while, a little bit of adjusting. I'm not expecting him to come off in week 1 and absolutely obliterate the opponents. But I think that once he gets into his groove and once he forms that connection and that chemistry with his teammates, I think that he's going to do really, really well. Mm-hmm. And I think the Jaguars are going to improve immensely as a team.
Now, I have a question for you. Does it hurt him or help him that Urban Meyer, who is coming off of retirement and from coaching at Ohio State, and now in the NFL, does that hurt him or help him as developing and trying to transition into the NFL?
That's a good question too. I would say a little bit detrimental, maybe, to how he's going to start making that adjustment because NFL is very different. And if you have someone who has been at college level for a long time, then the switch might not be as I'm not saying this very well at all. No, I'm not saying it well. It makes sense in my head. But I think on the other side, it might help him a little bit as well because it's familiarity in style. Mm-hmm. So it's something that he's used to in a world that's completely different from what it used to be. So it might be good for his well-being, but not necessarily for his athletic transition to the NFL. Because when you find something familiar and something in a world that is completely different, you latch onto it and you don't want to let go.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think that he'll definitely benefit, from playing under Urban Meyer. I think that, he runs a similar offense to what, Dabo Swinney ran in Clemson and, a lot of RPO, run pass options. And, Trevor Lawrence obviously thrived in that at Clemson. And he has, great running backs in Travis Etienne and James Robinson. He's got great outside threats in Dede Westbrook and DJ Chark. So I think that he definitely has the tools around him. And I think that Urban Meyer is a great head coach. I think he, knows what he's doing. He's hiring staff that can adjust to the game. And I think that, obviously they're not going to be setting the world on fire this year, but, they'll definitely, improve from, the past couple of seasons that they've had, especially.
Yeah, I think so too. I did want to point out something though. I think a few analysts said this while the draft was going on, but maybe Lawrence's one flaw is turnovers because he has struggled with turnovers in the past. And It's not like I was going to use an example, but I don't want to offend anyone. It's not like he was dropping balls left and right. But people have noticed that sometimes when he tries too hard to make plays happen, he tends to hold on to the ball in the pocket, and that causes fumbles. It does cause fumbles. So it'll be interesting to see how he reacts in situations like that when he plays in the NFL, when the pocket's getting smaller and smaller and they're getting closer to him. He doesn't know what to do, if he's going to just kind of try to throw it or if he's going to just hold on to it. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he instinctively reacts in situations that are familiar and will get extremely sped up from what he used to, just like what knee-jerk response is going to be. Because if he doesn't react well, that could be a big problem for them. Like, there have been so many great quarterbacks who struggle with knowing when to get the ball out of the pocket when it's getting smaller. And know when to stop, basically. So I'm interested to watch that, how he reacts to pressure at the NFL level versus the college level.
So there's another question here. Did Bill Belichick make the right call by drafting Mac Jones over another position?
You can take this one.
Okay. In my opinion, I think he did. I think what Bill Belichick is thinking of drafting Mac Jones is more of a long-term project, not so much like right now. Obviously, the Patriots still have Cam Newton, just re-signed a contract with them, and they still have Jarrett Stidham from Auburn a couple of years ago. I think what they're going to do is, similar to what they did with Brady, where they'll have him, sit on the bench for at least a season or so, unless something detrimental happens to, the other two quarterbacks. Kind of just learn the system, learn the game, try to understand, the right decisions and wrong decisions. And, I think if I'm Mike Jones, I'm waiting for that opportunity, and I'm taking as much as I can from, arguably one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And I'm trying to understand the game more, try to absorb as much information, understand the system, and really, be able to read defenses at a high level. That way, when you get that opportunity, people won't view you as like a bust or, a wrong decision. So I think, in my opinion, I think Bill Belichick did make the right decision drafting Mac Jones. I think that it's just going to take a little bit of time for them to show everybody that he made the right decision.
Yeah. I got a question for you.
Yep.
So what did you think about Cam Newton's performance with the Patriots last year?
It was bad. It was.
What do you think it says about Belichick?
I think a lot of people are trying to make a narrative of that Tom Brady carried Bill Belichick, but I think it's mutual. I think that they both succeeded with each other. In my opinion, though, I think that the receiving core of the Patriots was not good. N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, they really weren't helping Cam Newton at all. And obviously, I'm not trying to take the blame on them. Cam Newton performed horribly. He had a terrible season. His only good game was against the Jets, week 17. But
then again, it's the Jets.
Yeah. So I mean, but in my opinion, I think that he was really kind of just thrown into that. Really had a very shortened offseason. With the coronavirus, I think that he had a very shortened offseason. Really didn't understand the system as well as he wanted to. I think now, though, that he's got a year under his belt, he's got more time. I think he'll learn the system and learn what Bill Belichick wants. And now they've got, some great additions at tight end. And, I think that they'll make I think he'll do better this year than he did last year, in my opinion.
Do you think that the Patriots are Super Bowl contenders?
No, I think they're far from it. I think losing Julian Edelman this year and a couple of their defensive assets, I think right now they're a very young team, and I think that they have to, work their way back up to what they were with Tom Brady. So in my opinion, I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders yet.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's there are advantages and disadvantages to having young guys on your team. First of all, they're inexperienced. They just don't have as much experience as all the other players. But second of all, like you said with Mac Jones, it gives coaches time to kind of grow them as players and teach them what they want them to know. So I think that it'll be in a couple years, I think it'll start looking up for them with young players learning more and more. And you got young quarterbacks and stuff too. I think they will improve with time, but it's weird for, I guess, especially kids our age, because Patriots have always been that team.
Yeah.
And it's just strange now to see them struggle like a normal team without Tom Brady, the greatest of all time. So it'll be a really interesting thing to watch in the next couple seasons, how the Patriots adjust to this change and how they decide to kind of shape their young players into great players.
Yeah. And, transitioning to, their division rivals, the Jets, how do you think Zack Wilson will handle the, the pressure and expectations that are, placed on him right now?
Yeah, that is a good question too. Zack Wilson also was insane in college, especially in the 2020 season. He had a breakout season that year. 33 touchdown passes to just 3 interceptions. And the Jets really need a solid offense right now. Let me say that. They really need it. They've been one of the worst teams in the league for a long time now, and they could really use some fresh blood, some new players to shake it all up. And that being said, the Jets have had very bad luck with promising rookie quarterbacks in the past. But I was reading up on some of the stuff that the Jets coaches had to say about Wilson so far, and they said he looked very comfortable during their rookie mini camp. They said he was connecting well with wide receivers like Vincent Smith and Elijah Moore. So they're really excited for him. They think that he's performed at the level that they're expecting him to, and maybe even beyond that. So I think that he will definitely be a contender for this season as well. But like I said before, it's going to take a little bit of adjustment first. It's a really different game. But I think that with Trevor Lawrence, it's hard to not focus on him. But I really think that this guy is going to do great in the NFL, and that he shouldn't be slept on. I think we should pay attention to the Jets and see how they're doing, because I wouldn't be surprised if they improved immensely this season. I think it's really good for them. This is something they absolutely needed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a Jets fan myself, so there's not that much. Obviously, Sam Darnold didn't pan out for us, but Zack Wilson. He's, I've watched his tape in college. I think he's an incredible athlete. He's an incredible quarterback. I think, he'll obviously any rookie quarterback has trouble adjusting to the league. That's just growing pains as a young quarterback. But I think that, with the additions that the Jets have made this offseason, I think that, Zack Wilson will do, good in the NFL. And I think that, he'll bring some glory, if we had any, back to the Jets.
I'm really interested to watch the Week 1 game, because chances are he's starting on Week 1, and that's a lot. It's a lot. That's a lot to deal with as a quarterback fresh out of college, right in the NFL. So I'm interested to see on how he handles that from an athletic perspective. Is he gonna come out swinging? Is he gonna fumble a little bit before he gets back up and starts running? I'm really interested to see what's gonna happen, because I think it'll be a good season for the Jets regardless. But I'm just interested to see how long that adjustment period is going to be for Zack Wilson. Yeah. But I also would say that I think at least the Jets coaches have been extremely impressed with Wilson's mental approach and his work ethic so far. And that's a huge part of being a quarterback. I would argue that's why Tom Brady is the greatest of all time, is because his work ethic is absolutely insane. He works harder than anyone on his team. And that contributes a lot, including, natural talent does too. But working hard and showing up to practices and doing your best and just trying to perfect yourself, I guess, makes a huge difference in how you play, especially in the quarterback position. Sure, So work ethic and mental approach and maturity is a really, really important thing that coaches want to see in their quarterbacks. And I think that Zack Wilson has that. And I think that's really exciting for the Jets.
Yeah. So, talking about the other two quarterbacks that were drafted after him, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, they're both in, very weird situations where they have veteran quarterbacks above them. And, we're not really entirely sure if they'll be day one starters like Wilson and Lawrence, or if they'll, sit behind the veterans for a little while and then, kind of just assimilate the role there. So, I'll ask you about Justin Fields. How do you think that he'll do in Chicago?
I was a little bit surprised that the Bears decided to draft a quarterback, not going to lie. But Justin Fields is also a very solid player. I got some stats here. 41 touchdown passes with 3 interceptions with 10 additional rushing scores, which is crazy too. And I think that at a glance, Fields has everything you want in a QB. Like he has the mental approach, like I said, the explosive arm, the ability to make really quick decisions and really good decisions. And he's an incredible rusher, which is also huge for a quarterback. That's a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's definitely exceeded expectations. I say that everyone's excited, but when you have this many amazing quarterbacks in a draft, people are going to be excited. Yeah. Quarterback is arguably one of the most important roles in a football team. But I think it's the same situation with the Bears. I think that they really needed this. Like, they haven't really been contenders for a long time. They haven't really performed at the level that they've been expected to perform at in a long time. Granted, they're in a difficult division with the Green Bay Packers and sometimes the Vikings. Sometimes they're contenders, sometimes they're not. But I think the Bears needed some fresh blood. They needed a change up. And making the big decision to draft a quarterback, I think, was the right decision for them.
And, talking about, the other quarterback, Trey Lance, how do you think that situation will go? Obviously they have Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, and now they're bringing in Trey Lance. Do you think that, Trey Lance will start ahead of Jimmy G, or you think that, Jimmy will, at least start the season and then kind of, they'll bring in Trey Lance after?
I think that Jimmy Garoppolo will definitely start a majority of these games. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is actually he's a solid player. He's a good person, he's reliable. He's a good player. And there's also Trey Lance is an interesting situation too, because there's not much to look at from him. I think there's only one game of film to look at from the 2020 season. So it's a little bit more of a gamble versus Trevor Lawrence and Zack Wilson. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think they'll start Garoppolo and maybe let Lance kind of get used to it a little bit more before they start him at least. They might do that thing where if they're winning by a lot, they'll stick him in. But I definitely think that they would not start him, especially when they have Jimmy Garoppolo on their side, because they would like to see him in action more first before that happens.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, that Trey Lance does not have a lot of game film from this year. You think it was a surprise to most, if not everybody, that, Trey Lance only had really one full season and then the game this year? Do you think it was a surprise that he went third over, Justin Fields and Mac Jones?
I think it is a surprise. I would have been, if I was in the position where I wanted to draft him, I would have been nervous to do so because there were more reliable options. There were more quarterbacks with more experience and more things that I could look at to say, yes, this is going to be a good person for my team. So I am surprised that was the result of the draft, but, we'll see how he does. We'll see if that was the right decision or not. He didn't have a great 2019 season. That's not something we're disputing. But the lack of data on the 2020 season would have made me personally nervous. And I think that the Bears took a gamble. Not the Bears, sorry. But I think they took a gamble with it. I think they wanted to take a risk, so hopefully that works out for them.
So do you have any final thoughts on, not so much just, the 5 first-round rookies, but, any of the 8 that were drafted in the first 3 rounds, including Kyle Trask, Davis Mills, and, Kellen Mond?
I mean, nothing different from what I've already said. I'm really excited to see how these rookie quarterbacks do in the NFL, especially if they start. We'll see how through the season if they progress to starting positions. I think it'll be really cool to see how these college quarterbacks adjust to the NFL, because I don't think it's been a long time since we had this many promising quarterbacks be drafted in one season. So I think that, it's the young people are taking over, and it's going to be really cool to see how they do. Yeah, how they do ahead of the veterans, especially.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you guys for tuning in to today's Sports 2.0 show. My name's Akshay Kumbar, and with me is Allyson Park. We really thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed.
Bye.